Okay, my name is Carl W. Fidler. I was born in Adams County, about 3 miles north of East Berlin in 1930. So that makes me 92. And I'll start out this way. When I was born, my mother, my father, and my birthday are all on the same day.
Wow.
And the first time it was recorded in the state of Pennsylvania, and it's in Ripley's, believe it or not. Then my mother and father got divorced, and my mother waited 10 years and she remarried. She remarried a man from Hanover, and it just so happened his birthday was the same as mine, December the 8th.
Wow.
And they were married on that day, so it could have been in Ripley's, believe it or not, the second time. I graduated from East Berlin High School in 1948 at the age of 17. And before I graduated, I enlisted in the Air Force. I was farmed down on a farm, and they were making a slave out of me. And I made up my mind I wasn't going to be a slave for nobody. So I joined the Air Force. I took my basic training at Shepherd Air Force Base, Wichita Falls, Texas. And when I enlisted, I signed up to be an aerial photographer. But once Uncle Sam gets your name on a piece of paper, they put you where they want you. You don't have no say. So I took a basic at Shepherd Air Force Base, and then I went from there to Denver, Colorado, to armament school, tearing guns apart, putting them together. I loaded fused bombs, live bombs, put them in B-29 airplanes, ready to drop. Then I had to take them back out, take the fuses out of them, put them back in the warehouse where they on the rack. I was there, I think, for about 4 months or more. Then they sent me to Fort Ord, California, and I got my shots and everything. And the next thing I knew, I was on a big general ship, General USS Sultan, headed for Korea. I didn't really know if I was going to Korea or going to Japan. We got outside of California, outside of San Francisco. We ran into a typhoon for 3 days, and it was bad. It was so bad, the cooks had us tie the pans on the stove to cook, and even the captain got sick on the ship. And it took 18 days I spent on the water, 3 days in the typhoon. We went into Yokohama, Japan, where we unloaded about 2,000 servicemen, and then they took the ship and we headed for Okinawa. And when I got down to Okinawa, they put me in the Air Police Squadron. And I was in there for 3 months. They told me I couldn't make any rank, so I transferred out into a 4th Fighter Interceptor Squadron. We had an F-82 twin Mustang plane with big radar domes in the center. And there, they put me in supply, ordering airplane parts for aircraft. I was in charge of all the guns, ammunition. I was only 17 years old. And yeah, I was in charge of the clothing, and I was squadron truck driver. It was a mouth of the mess hall to the flight line where we kept our planes. And while working on the Air Force Base, I met 2 Japanese boys, They're two brothers, and they're from Japan, and they could speak good English. They worked on the Air Force Base, and to this day, I don't know how I become friends with them, but it just so happened that I did. And then after I got to Naha Air Force Base in Okinawa, I went over in the village, and a boy, a native Okinawan boy, had a bicycle shop over there. And I become friends with him, and he told me he knew where the Whizzer motorbike ran, all in pieces. I said, let's go get it. So we went out, we gathered it all up, the pieces, took it back to the bicycle shop, and we put it all together. And I rode that bike over that island for 4 years. And I got pictures here, and I got around places where nobody else, no surfmen seemed to get. And before the service started, these two Japanese brothers, took me to a big hill. I have a picture of it here. Halfway between Okinawa Air Force Base and Naha, the capital of Okinawa. I rode past that hill many times, walked past it, and never knew what was there. So one day these two Japanese boys took me in there. The hill was camouflage, and but there was opening. They had a little side door on the side. It was camouflage, and they took me in there, and I was really shocked. During World War II, the Japanese had, before the World War II, the two Japanese had the Okinawan poor people hollow that hill out. It was wider than this room. It was wide enough that you could drive 5 tractor trailers down to it. And right inside the door, the main entrance, they had, Japanese had a hospital during World War II. And on the left-hand side, there was room that you could drive down through with a truck. If you did, you had to back out. The ceilings inside was at least as high as these ceilings here, but they were dome-shaped. And on the right-hand side, the Japanese had a hospital. Behind that hospital, they had a cafeteria partitioned off. Behind the cafeteria, they had it partitioned off for the nurses and doctors staff. Then there was, everything inside was concrete from what I could see, but there was an area about as wide as this right here. And on the other side of that said 5 kamikaze Japanese planes that was left in there from World War II. There may have been as high as 20 in there during World War II, but there were still 5 new ones in there. And behind those 5 airplanes, there was 2 red tanks, 10 foot in diameter and 10 or 12 foot high, where they stored for gasoline. And beyond that, they call it a cave, and it was anywhere from 300 to 500 feet long inside. The peons had hollowed out, and it was filled with rockets, bombs, guns, all kinds of ammunition. And when the Americans took over Okinawa in 1945, they stored direction systems, rockets and bombs and all kinds of stuff. There was a lot in there. It was packed so full you couldn't even walk down to the other end. And I really didn't think too much of it. On the side where this opening was, they had a runway going outside, which was camouflaged about 150 feet. They had green grass growing on, they had that level. But once those planes took off, they never come back. They used them to dive into American ships sitting out in the water. And then in 1950, about the middle of 1950, a civilian come down to my Quonset hut. And he said, "Are you Fidler?" I said, "Yes." I was sitting outside my rocking chair. I think I have a picture of that here too. And he said, "How would you like working for me?" I said, "Who are you?" He said, "My name's Harold Sweeney. I'm in charge of the OSI, Office of Special Investigation, on Okinawa." And he said, "We need more help." He said, we know things are going on here. The Korean War had already started. And he said, we just don't have enough help. And I said, "Who told you to get a hold of me?" He said, "I'm not going to tell you." I said, "You don't have to. I know who told you. That was my CO, Lieutenant Colonel John F. Sharp." And I had him on my finger just like that. And I said, "What does it pay?" He said, "It doesn't pay anything." And he said, "Another thing, you only make one mistake. That's it." And I said, I said, "What do you want me to do?" He said, "Once you keep your eyes and ears open, if you see anything that doesn't look right, call me." He gave me his phone number. I never kept it. I don't know if I did. I don't know where it is. Exactly 3 weeks after I talked to him, told him I keep my eyes and ears open, I'm riding down through the village on my motorbike, and one Japanese brother come running up to me crying his eyes out. I said, "What are you crying for?" He said, "My brother got killed last night." I said, "Where? How?" He said, "We were down in the cave." There was this hill hall, and they called it the cave. He said, "We were in here taking shells apart and ammunition apart, and one of the shells exploded and killed his brother." I knew I was on to something pretty big at that time. And I left to go at that time. And then about a week or so later, I seen him again in the village, and we talked, and when he told about his brother, he would loosen up. I could say, ask him most anything. And I said, "What are you taking them shelves stuff apart down there in that cave?" He said, "We're selling it to China. China was our enemy." And he said, "China's paying us big money for this." I said, "Well, how are you getting it to China?" He said, "China's got a big ship sitting out here in the water, and we're loading it on there at nighttime, take it out and put it on at nighttime." And then I said, "What's the name of the ship?" He said, "The Unamaru." I said, "The Unamaru?" I said, "That's the Japanese name." He said, "Yeah." He said, "They put that on there so it wouldn't be stick out and everybody be able to see it." And as soon as I had that information, I called Harold Sweeney and told him what was going on. And then they started watching that ship. And that ship was there for almost 3 months before they got loaded. And this is the main thing. There were little things that happened when I worked for the OSI. Catching civilians and guys raping girls over there. And when they did catch them, I asked Harold Sweeney, I said, "What do you do with those guys?" He said, "We send them back to the States, most of them civilians." And So after I talked to Harold Sweeney and told him about the ship, Chinese ship sitting out there, I asked him, I said, what else you want me to know, that you want me to do? He said, see if you can find out when that ship is leaving for China. I said, I'll see what I can do. So it took me almost 3 months to get when that ship was leaving for China. I finally got it narrowed down to within 2 days. And I called Harold Sweeney and I said, I'm not going to try to get it any closer than that. I said, that's as close as I'm going to get it. He said, that's close enough. He called the Navy, Air Force, they had two, they were PBY planes, twin engine propeller driven. They set pretty high off the ground. They carried bombs and rockets. They used them for reconnaissance over Korea. And so he got a hold of that, the Navy, told him when the ship was leaving. When that ship left Okinawa to go to China, they followed it halfway out in the Pacific Ocean and they blew it up. And after the planes come back, Harold Sweeney called me into his office. He said, for what you've done, you should have a commendation. But he said, I'm not going to give you one because if I do, and they find out what I did over in the village, they'll sneak up behind you and take a knife and cut you through it. And then he said, I'll make it up to you. And the next thing he said was, you'll never know how many American jihad lives I may have saved by having that ship sunk with all that ammunition. And then I asked him, I said, how many Chinese do you think was on that ship? He said, no less than 300. Well, I knew as long as that ship was sitting there, and they had to take all this equipment out at nighttime, that one guy couldn't do it by himself. So I'm pretty sure most of those Chinese helped load that ship. And then Harold Sweeney said, forget this ever happened. He said, this is top secret. And he said, I know there's nothing ever in the papers on Okinawa or anywhere else about what really happened. And then I told him, I said, I don't think I can forget about it. He said, you can forget about it. I said, well, we'll see. I must have forgot about it because I left over there, come back on a sister ship. I went over to General Sultan, and I come back on, it just left my mind. So I got pictures of that here too, I think. And it was a nice, easy ride coming back from Okinawa. And I joined the Air National Guard at Harrisburg, and I was in there. I worked in supply in there too, getting airplane parts, and I made a staff sergeant there. I was just sergeant when I come back from Okinawa. Then they sent me, when I come back from Okinawa, they sent me up to Sampson Air Force Base in Lake Geneva, New York State.
Where?
And I was in there for I finished out my time at Sampson Air Force Base. They put me in Food Service Squadron and barracks chief, and I had my own room. And the guys in there, they were all learning to be cooks. So I'd go to Rochester at night, in the weekends and stuff to the movies, and my officer, he was a second lieutenant, Nelligan, I can't think of his first name, and him and I was pretty good friends, and we had on every Friday evening we had a GI party where everybody scrubbed the barracks floor. And I put my fatigues on, and I went in there, got down on the floor and scrubbed the floor with guys. They said, Sarge, you don't have to do this. I said, I know I don't. I said, but I don't want my men to do anything that I won't do. And I kept eyes open to the guys, and the guys seemed to be doing the most work. I went in to talk to Lieutenant Nelligan. I said, I need a pass for the guy. And he said, why? I said, he did good work for me. I said, and I want to reward him. And so he wrote me out a pass for two of the fellows. And when the GI party was over, I called them together and I said, hey, I got a surprise for two of you gentlemen. And when I called their names out and they walked up, and I told the rest of them, I said, these two men are going along with me to Rochester tonight to the movies. And boy, I'll tell you, those guys would have done anything I wanted them to do. Best bunch of guys you ever wanted to meet. And we go to Rochester, come back maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, walk into the mess hall. The guys said, what do you want, Sarge? I said, make me a T-bone steak. I told them how I want it. Make me a steak. I ate good. Oh, I can't complain. I ate good all the time I was in the service. And then I got ready to be discharged from the Air Force, Sampson Air Force Base. And the only reason I did it because my best buddy, and he was from Avoca, Wisconsin, about 60 miles west of Madison. And we went to basic together, we went through armament school together, we went overseas together. He was in the 25th Fighter Squadron, and they had just gotten F-80 jets. And when the Korean War started, his outfit was the first one to go over to Korea. And our planes flew from Okinawa to Korea and back. It just so happened the first month of the Korean War, we lost 8 planes and 13 officers. And I shot full with them. Best bunch of guys you ever want to meet. And my supply officer was a captain, but when he was an air ace over Germany in World War II, and he had a reserve rank of major, so the Korean War started, he got his rank as major. And 4 planes